Can dogs really see supernatural beings? If evil spirits truly exist, why do those who commit countless sins still live so well? Today, we bring you the latest 2025 thriller masterpiece, Good Boy. In the quiet town of Sleep, Texas, a man drove to a remote forest with his loyal dog. But just as he stepped out of the car to open the gate, the dog inside suddenly sensed something unusual in the air. Startled, it turned around and saw a mysterious figure standing behind the car. Yet when it looked again, the shadowy figure had vanished into thin air. This wasn't the first time the dog had seen it. 2 months earlier, the same shadow often appeared in corners around the house. Although the shadow clearly exists, its owner completely cannot see it. Todd got back into the car, started the engine, and drove toward the depths of the forest. Todd was a fertilizer salesman whose life had once been smooth and ordinary until a sudden illness struck him a few months ago, leaving him prone to fainting spells. To recover, he quit his job and returned to his grandfather's old house with his dog, Indy. After several minutes of bumpy driving, they arrived at a rundown cabin. Seeing the familiar place brought back memories of his childhood. Back then, his grandfather had a loyal dog named Bandit. They used to play together in the forest every day. But one day, his grandfather suddenly fell ill and passed away. After that, Bandit mysteriously disappeared. Todd's parents believed the dog must have followed his grandfather to the other side. This moved Todd deeply by the dog's loyalty, so when he grew up, he adopted Indy. Though it had been more than 10 years since he last came back, the old house looked exactly as he remembered. He found the key hidden under the doorstep and unlocked the long-sealed wooden door. Inside, the place was a mess, filled with dust and clutter. While Todd started cleaning, Indy wandered around and suddenly felt a chilling coldness in the air. From the moment they stepped inside, Indy sensed that something was roaming through the house. Then a strange, rotten smell reached his nose. Following the scent, Indy walked to the basement door. He sat at the entrance, staring down into the darkness. When Todd came upstairs, Indy quickly ran over to him. He wants to warn his master that this place is unclean, but Todd thinks Indy wants to play with him. He simply patted Indy's head and went back to cleaning. After half a day of hard work, Todd cleared a space, found some blankets, and decided to sleep on the living room couch for the night. The long drive had drained him. The moment he lay down, he fell into a deep sleep. But soon after, Indy sensed movement inside the house again. He raised his head and looked around, but there was nothing at the door. Just as he thought it was his imagination, faint footsteps echoed through the living room. The sound moved from downstairs up to the second floor. Indy followed it and entered a dusty room filled with old furniture. In the center of the room, Indy sees a chair, and behind the chair, he clearly sees a mass of black substance. While Indy stared at it, Todd suddenly appeared behind him. Todd had woken up and found his dog missing. Worried, he began searching the house. When he found Indy standing still in his grandfather's old room, he thought nothing of it, assuming the dog was just exploring. The next morning, Todd cleaned the entire house from top to bottom. After hours of effort, the once messy place finally looked livable again. Then he drove down to town to buy supplies. Since there was too much to carry, he left Indy at home. But as soon as Todd left, Indy once again felt something strange in the house. He searched every corner, but nothing appeared. Feeling uneasy, he suddenly heard barking from outside. He looked down and realized the sound was coming through the floor vent. When he peered closer, he saw another dog. Stunned, Indy watched as the dog calmly walked upstairs, as if it knew the house well. Indy followed, but when he reached the second floor, the dog was gone. Only a red collar lay on the floor. He sniffed it carefully and realized the scent was somehow familiar. Just as he tried to recall where he'd smelled it before, something terrifying happened. The horrifying sight made Indy back away in fear. As he turned to leave the room, he saw a dark shadow standing downstairs. The eerie figure felt just like the one he had seen behind the car. Panicked, Indy crawled under the bed, holding his breath, not daring to make a sound. When Todd appeared, Indy quickly crawled out from under the bed. But Todd wasn't in the mood to play. He lay down on the bed, looking exhausted and unwell. Sensing something was wrong, Indy climbed up to check on his owner, but Todd ignored him and pushed him away. Helpless, Indy lay on the floor and quietly kept watch beside the bed. Before long, he too fell asleep. But in the middle of the night, that strange feeling returned once again. Indy woke up suddenly and realized Todd was no longer in the room. As he looked around in confusion, an even stranger sight appeared before him. A trail of muddy footprints had formed across the floor. Yet what frightened him most was that those footprints had no smell. He followed them outside the room and found they led down to the living room. As soon as he reached the bottom of the stairs, he saw his owner walking toward him. But something was off. Instead of coming upstairs, Todd turned and headed the other way. He began slamming into the door again and again like someone possessed. Panicked, Indy rushed forward and nudged Todd's arm with his nose, finally waking him from the trance. But once awake, Todd had no memory of what had just happened. Seeing the bloodstains on the door, he turned and went back to the bedroom. However, the nightmare was far from over. The next morning, Todd called his younger sister, Vera. He told her that he wasn't feeling well and feared he might end up like their grandfather. It turned out that Todd's family carried a hereditary disease. His father had died from it years ago. Vera tried to comfort him, telling him not to worry. Medical technology was far more advanced now, and maybe he could still be cured. Just as Todd and his sister were comforting each other on the phone, Indy once again heard movement from upstairs. He followed the sound back to the same room where he had seen the chair before. But this time, the chair was no longer empty. An old man was sitting there. The man coughed violently, spitting up mouthfuls of blood. But at that moment, a pitch-black hand appeared in the basement, crawling all the way up the stairs to the upper floor. The horrifying sight terrified Indy so much that he nearly lost control of himself. Downstairs, Todd had no idea what was happening. After hanging up the phone, he felt an overwhelming fatigue and soon fell asleep on the couch. When he woke up again, it was already evening. He got up to feed Indy, but after searching the whole house, he couldn't find him anywhere. Then, Todd heard a noise coming from the basement. Behind the basement door, he found Indy trembling all over. The dog was covered in mud, and Todd assumed he had sneaked out while he was asleep. Though a bit annoyed, Todd didn't scold him. He carried Indy to the bathroom and started cleaning the dirt off his fur. But halfway through the bath, Todd suddenly started coughing violently, then vomited a large amount of blood. Feeling weaker by the minute, Todd went to the hospital for a checkup. The results were grim. His condition was worsening rapidly, and time was running out. Hearing the diagnosis, Todd was devastated. He asked the doctor if he could try an experimental drug. He had recently learned about a new treatment for his illness, but it was still in the clinical trial stage and not yet approved. Todd wanted to volunteer as a test subject, but the doctor refused. The process required multiple approvals, and Todd likely wouldn't live long enough to wait for them. Just as Todd was about to argue, Indy suddenly sensed that strange presence again. He saw something moving inside the doctor's office. Startled, Indy broke free from Todd's arms. Realizing his own lapse in composure, Todd apologized to the doctor and left the hospital dejected. But the strange events still weren't over. That evening, as Indy lay by the bed keeping watch, he saw a shadow flash across the hallway. He was about to stand up when a large hand suddenly reached out from behind. Turning around, Indy was shocked to see that the one grabbing him was Todd. Because of the doctor's diagnosis that day, Todd couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. Feeling hopeless, he could only pour out his pain to Indy. But just as he was speaking to his dog in tears, the dark shadow appeared again at the doorway. Though it vanished in an instant, Indy saw it clearly. He let out a low growl, warning the shadow not to come closer. Yet while Indy's eyes were fixed on the door, the shadow silently appeared right behind him. God damn it! The sudden sight startled Todd. In a burst of anger, he tied Indy outside and forced him to sleep in the doghouse. Seeing his owner's anger, Indy understood what it meant. He wanted to get closer and comfort Todd, but his furious master ignored him and went back inside. Later that night, thunder rolled across the sky and heavy rain poured down. But Indy didn't hide inside the doghouse. Instead, he sat on the roof, watching the second-floor bedroom with vigilance. Upstairs, Todd also noticed his loyal dog sitting in the rain. Though still upset about being bitten earlier, he wasn't made of stone. He stood up and headed downstairs, planning to bring Indy back inside. But just as he reached the door, a violent cough struck him. He sat down on the bed, trying to steady his breathing. Outside, Indy heard the sound and grew anxious. He wanted to rush inside, but the iron chain held him back. As Indy struggled, he suddenly saw a hand reaching out from inside the doghouse. The blackened hand grabbed the chain, trying to drag him in. Panicked, Indy broke free with all his strength. He ran to the front door only to find it locked from the inside. He couldn't get in. Then, a barking sound came from the direction of the basement. Turning around, Indy saw that the basement door, which had been shut, was now wide open. Through the dim corridor, he spotted the remains of a dog lying inside. Though the body had decayed into bones, Indy recognized the scent instantly. It was the same dog he had seen in the living room before. Bandit had never disappeared. He had died in the basement. Upstairs, Todd's coughing finally eased. He lay back on the bed, trying to get comfortable. But then he heard something moving outside. When he looked up, he saw a terrifying sight. The horror made Todd jump to his feet and slam the bedroom door shut, but in his panic, the wooden door bounced open again. When he turned back, the muddy footprints that had been there moments ago had vanished. Just then, Indy appeared at the door. Seeing his soaked dog, Todd felt guilty. He hugged Indy tightly, apologizing for leaving him outside. As Todd turned to get a towel, he froze in shock. On the bed lay another version of himself. Indy also realized that his owner had passed away, and he lay beside the bed completely at a loss. At that moment, Indy saw the dark shadow appear at the doorway. This time, he finally saw it clearly. It was a creature covered in mud. When it dragged Todd away, Indy chased after them desperately. He saw Todd being pulled into the basement and followed without hesitation. But when he entered, the basement had completely changed. The clutter was gone, and a dark tunnel had appeared on the wall. Hearing Todd's painful screams, Indy trembled but didn't back down. He ran into the tunnel. Moments later, Indy emerged, dragging Todd's muddy body out from the darkness. As he tried to pull his master upstairs, the wooden door suddenly swung open. The shadow stood before them again. Indy whimpered softly, as if begging the shadow to let his owner go. But his plea went unanswered. The shadow leaned close and whispered in Indy's ear. It was then that Indy understood. The shadow wasn't a monster, but death itself. Todd's time had come, and death had come to take him away. Though Indy stayed by Todd's side, unwilling to let him go, no one can defy the cycle of life and death. As death took Todd into the darkness, Indy sat motionless at the entrance of the tunnel. He refused to leave, waiting for his master to return. He waited from night to morning, and from morning back to night again. Days passed, but Todd never came back. At last, the basement door creaked open. The exhausted Indy turned his head and saw Vera standing there. After losing contact with her brother, Vera had rushed back to the old house. She found Todd's body in the bedroom. After the funeral, Vera took Indy away with her. But was the one she took really Indy? And that was the full story of the 2025 horror thriller Good Boy. It's a chilling and emotionally powerful film that breaks away from genre conventions, delivering a haunting experience with bold imagination and visual strength. If you enjoy this kind of film, you should definitely check out the original. Well, that's all for today. See you next time.